Another mass shooting and remembering George Voinovich.
From the Battelle studio at WOSU at Cosi, this is Columbus on the Record. Joining Mike Thompson this week, Kathy Kandinsky, State House reporter for the Columbus Dispatch, Jackie Borchard, State House reporter for Cleveland.com, Dale Butlin, Democratic strategist, and Terry Casey, Republican strategist.
The shootings only get worse. The rhetoric remains loud. So far, very little changes. The 49 victims of the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando once again brought to the forefront debates on the definition of terrorism, how do we fight terrorism, gun control, and even immigration policy. The two presumed nominees for president provided the contrast.
On Sunday, Americans woke up to a nightmare that's become mind-numbingly familiar. Another act of terrorism in a place no one expected. This is a moment when all Americans need to stand together. No matter how many times we endure attacks like this, the horror never fades. The murder of innocent people breaks our hearts, tears at our sense of security, and makes us furious.
The bottom line is that Hillary supports policies that bring the threat of radical Islam into America and allow it to grow overseas, and it is growing. In fact, Hillary Clinton's catastrophic immigration plan will bring vastly more radical Islamic immigration into this country, threatening not only our society, but our entire way of life. We need a new leader. We need a new leader fast. They have put political correctness above common sense, above your safety, and above all else. I refuse to be politically correct.
Kathy Kandinsky, there it is. The two styles, what divides at least the electorate, reasonableness versus rage after these shootings.
Precisely. I mean, I thought Mrs. Clinton came off as pretty calm. She tried to reassure her. The policies she spoke about were substantive. On the other hand, Trump was a lot more emotional, rambling. He blamed the president for siding with the terrorists. He reiterated calls for his ban on Muslims entering the country, which is, of course, highly controversial. And I think he kind of missed an opportunity to sound a little more presidential in the wake of such a horrific thing. Also, a lot of people were upset by the first thing out of his mouth was kind of congratulating himself for predicting it. Well, it's not really the right time for that. And of course, as we all know, many, many people have predicted attacks on U.S. soil. So it's, I don't know what he's doing.
It's a sad tragedy, but there's a lot of policy questions. To me, one of the most serious questions was the FBI had tips on this guy, and twice they dug in trying to find out more. And I hope there's additional things that come out on what the FBI did or didn't find. And there's a legitimate question of when somebody threatens these things, can you arrest them? What do you do? Or do you just wait until they do something tragic?
My understanding is they did check him out for 10 months, and they did look at these brags that he had about knowing people in Al-Qaeda and ISIS and so forth. They closed the investigation because they simply didn't find anything and concluded that a lot of what he said was false. But back to the question of what this has meant for the presidential campaign. Donald Trump's shameful response to this shooting, as Kathy said, reissuing his call for the Muslim ban, implying that the President of the United States somehow secretly sympathizes with terrorists, has put not just his party, but vulnerable GOP senators like Rob Portman, who are up for re-election this year, in a real bind. Trump has clearly has no intention of restraining himself or conducting a responsible campaign.
Jackie, Republicans, John Kasich, one of them, almost immediately distanced themselves from those comments about, especially the president being sympathetic to the terrorism cause.
Yeah, they're not lining up behind him as they haven't in other recent weeks. Since he has become the presumptive Republican nominee, and this issue is a difficult one. And while you can split it down party lines, there are a lot of people where the party doesn't matter and it's a personal issue for them. I think it has been interesting. Both candidates probably see this issue as one that they feel they can win on with their supporters. And we saw that especially with Donald Trump's speech, playing to his base, the fears of Muslims, of terrorist attacks. He's been saying that all along. So it was nothing surprising, but targeting Obama as part of that took it a little bit too far for
the problem is the polls on this one are showing, I think the latest Washington Post ABC poll, 70% people view Trump negatively. Now, of course, Clinton has her own negative problems, but not to the same degree. 55% view her as negative. He's not doing anything to help expand his base, not doing anything to bring people behind him. He's doing the exact opposite. He's got Republican leaders that are coming out and saying, well, I don't think the ban's in the best interest of the United States and things like that. I think he's hurting his chances.
But on the immigration, it's not just an issue here. If you look at Europe, next week the UK is going to vote on whether to stay in the EU or not. Part of it's about economics, but part of it is about the immigration policies.
But this man was not an immigrant.
No, he wasn't, but his parents were. And then you've got the LA area shooting where you had folks involved, and there's questions. This guy in Orlando apparently made 2 trips to Saudi Arabia. Maybe that was legitimate and he paid for it, or did somebody else pay for it? There's still a lot of questions.
Dale, on Hillary Clinton's point here, she sounded more presidential, but she really didn't offer anything more than what's been going on, the status quo, yet these attacks keep happening. I know she's pushed for tougher gun control recently, and we'll get to that in a moment, but what is she offering that's different? People are tapping into at least Trump's anger, that at least he wants to do something.
Yeah, well, the reason that there's nothing particularly new that's come out of Hillary Clinton is the same reason that there's nothing new that's coming out of the Republicans either. The fact of the matter is, halting these kinds of attacks is probably not possible. You probably can't halt a lone wolf attack, which is what this is. There are things that you can do, but there are certainly things that you shouldn't do. And when you call for a ban on Muslims, as Donald Trump has done, and implied that the war we have is with Islam, is with the religion, it is counterproductive. This is the kind of thing that would play right into ISIS's hands and make our terrorism problem even worse.
But Dale, part of the specific question raised is you've got Syrian immigrants without papers, without any way to go and check back what was their history in the country they came from.
That simply is not true. We have 2,000 Syrian immigrants that have come to this country over the last number of years, and for all immigrants, not just Syrian, it takes 2 years of vetting. 2 years of vetting.
There's thousands more that Obama wants to bring in from Syria where you can't check and you can't verify very well.
Terry, since 9/11, there have been something like 150,000 or 200,000 immigrants that have come to this country. And the number of people who have either been kicked out or have been arrested for terrorist activity has been a grand total of 2. That is less than getting struck by lightning. That's less than your odds of being struck by lightning.
Let's get to the other side of this debate. A little flexibility on gun control seems to be emerging after the Orlando shootings. The gunman was once on a terrorism watch list, but still he was able to buy a handgun and a semi-automatic assault rifle. That brought calls for banning assault weapons, tougher background checks, and at least laws to keep people on the terror watch list from buying guns. Senator Rob Portman now says he supports tighter restrictions on terror suspects. Jackie Borchard, even Rob Portman now seems to be showing some flexibility on the no-fly, no-buy list, they're calling it now.
Right, and senators voted on at least 2 variations on the idea of banning people from the no-fly list. One was proposed by a Democrat, Senator Feinstein, and one was proposed by a Republican, Senator Corinne from Texas. And Portman voted against Feinstein's amendment. And earlier this week, he said he believed that was because it was limited to a no-fly list, which later his office learned it was not, but he says he would still have voted against it because the Republican idea was the better one. But really, Senator Portman's opinion now stands with the vast majority of Americans who think that it's a no-brainer that we should not allow terrorists, known terrorists, or suspected terrorists to be able to legally purchase guns in this country.
If you tighten down the law, which sounds good in theory, the question is who's doing the no-fly list? Who's putting the data in or not in on people who are mentally ill? The difficulty is, and I remember the case, I think Ted Kennedy once was on the no-fly list. That list has maybe got 800,000 people. How do you make those lists or those databases current and accurate? Because apparently the guy in Florida would have passed the tests and would have been able to buy based on those rules if they were passed.
Look, it's true that sometimes mistakes happen. Most people of goodwill also have a concern for civil liberties, right? But this should not be beyond the mind of man to come up with a compromise that will work. For example, if you find that you're on a list, if you're on the no-fly list, for example, which means that you could not buy a gun, and you think you're on there erroneously, why can you not have an expedited appeals process so that you can demonstrate that you've been put on the thing erroneously? But the alternative certainly shouldn't be, well, everybody on this terrorist watch list should be able to buy a gun. 90% of the American people and 85% of Republicans agree with that. We got to close this down. If you're too dangerous to fly, you're too dangerous to buy a gun.
But how do you make the lists accurate and work in real time, Dale? If they aren't accurate, all it does is tell the terrorists, I can't buy, but I'm going to get my friend who's not on the list to buy.
First of all, the no-fly list is a much smaller list than the terrorist watch list. So how about we start with the no-fly list? Let's start with that, and then we can move to the broader. But again, I say, because there are mistakes doesn't mean that everybody who's a suspected terrorist should be able to buy a gun.
Kathy Kanditsky, the other list here, the other debate here is, should AR-15, the assault weapons, be available for purchase by anybody?
Right.
Ted Strickland changed his position. He voted against the assault weapons ban back in the 90s. Now he says he's for a ban on these types of weapons. Rob Portman has not gone that far. Where does that go? Anywhere?
I think there's increased support. I think everyone's looking to kind of public sentiment on these issues, and I think that we've seen, the last poll I saw, I was looking at polls before we came on, I think about 57 to 60% of Americans now support a ban on assault weapons. We had Sandy Hook, we had this incident. I mean, I think more and more people are questioning the value of having assault weapons on the street, having them so easily available. So it looks like politicians are kind of following suit with that line of thinking. I think that's why you're seeing people, particularly in these tight races, switching their opinion on it.
Do we ever see these assault weapons being banned again by legislative action?
I think that there is a possibility. I don't think it's going to happen anytime real soon, but I do think that Kathy is right. I think there's a growing feeling of why is it that we have these weapons on the street. Back in 2011, an American-born Al-Qaeda spokesman, whose name was Adam Gadan, said in a video, in urging people to go out and buy assault weapons, he said, and I'm quoting him directly, "America is absolutely awash with easily obtainable firearms. You can go down to a gun show at the local convention center and come away with a fully automatic assault rifle without a background check and most likely without having to show an identification card. So what are you waiting for?"
Terry, where does this go? Where's the tipping point where the AR-15 is made illegal? Does that come?
Well, Dale said automatic weapons. As I understand, this guy had a semi-automatic weapon. So if you're going to ban automatic and think
they're already
assault,
illegal.
Those are already banned.
Right, but you've also got handguns, because I think it's illegal on handguns to have the big clips. But two of the big mass shootings, one in California, one in Connecticut, are in states with some of the toughest gun control, and that didn't seem to have stopped things there. So, I think people are going to look at ways you can improve things, but it's not an easy, simple
pass along. But why not make those laws tougher? If these are tough gun control laws in, say, Illinois, and it's the Chicago
if they
shootings,
aren't working there, maybe it's not the problem.
But why isn't the argument make them tougher rather than do away with them?
How about we make them tougher all over? The problem is, Terry, if they're tough in one state but they're lax in the next door neighbor state, people can just drive across the border. We don't have border checks in
and that's what happens
states.
in Chicago. They do have the toughest laws, but they're also, it's illegal weapons that are being used in those crimes.
But the fact of the matter is, in California and in Connecticut, where they have the tough laws, these people bought the guns legally, even with tough laws in
Which
those
is what you
states.
saw in Florida. I mean, I think what was so striking is that the shooter bought the firearm legally, a week
Week
few
before,
days
yeah.
before the shooting. I think that, people are really moved by that.
But he wasn't on a list, so even if
Right,
we passed these laws, it wouldn't have prohibited him from getting them.
I think what common sense would tell you is this. No other country in the world has the kind of problem with mass shootings and gun violence generally that we do. You can't blame it on violent movies and video games because other countries watch the same movies and play the same games as we do. I don't believe Americans are inherently more violent than those people of other countries, nor do we have more
I think
mentally
you see the
unstable
problem
people.
right here.
Yeah.
it's
So
probably
no,
not
so
bad.
what's the common denominator? This country, unlike every place else, has unlimited access to guns.
Let's get to our next topic. The shooting of an African-American man by plainclothes Columbus police officers is drawing protests. Columbus police shot Henry Green in South Linden last week. Police say when they ordered Green to drop a gun he was carrying, he fired at them. A friend walking with Green says the officers never identified themselves. Green supporters want an independent investigation, and they want the city to stop stepped-up summertime patrols in their neighborhoods. Terry Casey, Ron O'Brien, the Franklin County prosecutor, seems to want to just go with the regular investigation of this rather than a special prosecutor, a special investigation.
Well, there's two questions. Part of you covered some of it. These two officers were in a van with dark glass, unmarked. They jumped out. They weren't in uniform, and it is legal for somebody to have open carry of a gun. But I think the county prosecutor here, the good thing in Franklin County, Ron O'Brien and Mike Miller before him, both had a policy on any of these kind of shootings. They go to the grand jury, which involves civilians. And the prosecutor, once they get the report from the police department, the prosecutor can certainly say, we've got all the information we need, or we need more. The grand jurors could say we need more. So clearly there needs to be a thorough investigation. But there's a policy question of, is it smart to have police officers in these kind of vans unmarked, or is it better to have a visible police presence?
But the grand juries are secret. We don't know how the case is presented. The critics will say that it's slanted towards law enforcement. Wouldn't it be better to answer all questions and have an independent prosecutor?
Well, anybody
here?
knows that in a grand jury situation, a prosecutor can get an indictment on anything if he wants to, or he can not get an indictment. It's all, they present their side of the case. How they present the case decides what the grand jury does. So if you want a more open process and a more balanced process, you would have a different process than the grand jury.
People use that old canard over and over again. A ham sandwich could be indicted by the prosecutor. I've known people who have been on grand juries, and they're not stupid people. They're real people.
No, but they
and
only
if they
hear
feel,
one side of the. They only hear the presentation
but
from the
they
prosecutor.
can ask questions if they feel things are not right or correct. Believe me, they can press.
But with all the
to get
police
more
shootings that
information.
have happened in this city over the past 20 years, how many police officers have been charged by a grand jury?
I don't think that many, but most of them have involved shootings of officers in marked cruisers, clearly identified in uniform. This is a unique case because the strategy by the mayor's office is let's have them in vehicles that you don't know it's police and have people not in uniform.
Yeah, that part of the story is a little confusing to me. If the idea of the program is to, improve
Community
relations between police and the community and community safety and in the summertime where there's more kids and families running around, you'd think that they would want to be identified and be visually present as well. But so that part doesn't really make sense to me.
You know, it really, with due respect, I'm not even sure that the outrage in the community is even directly related to the facts of this particular case. I think it's more about the way people of color feel that they're treated by the police and the sort of institutional racism that's still prevalent in our society. And the truth of the matter is, people treat people who look like me differently than they do people who look like Mr. Green, who is the gentleman who was shot. And I frankly think that those in urban neighborhoods would be more likely to respect the law if they believe that the law respects those in urban neighborhoods.
And South Linden is a tough neighborhood where this happened. And
Okay, our next topic, Columbus City Council is considering an ordinance that would keep protesters a specified distance away from abortion clinics. The ordinance would prohibit any harassing activity within 15 feet of a clinic's premises Anti-abortion activists and the ACLU say the move would stifle free speech. Dale Butlin, where is the line, literally, the line between free speech and anti-harassment behavior?
Well, oftentimes in our society, we have to balance equally valid competing rights and interests. This proposed law, in my judgment, is a good faith effort to try to balance the rights of protesters to protest at abortion clinics and the right of women to exercise a constitutionally protected right to have an abortion without being harassed or intimidated. So I know that Right to Life believes that they've said that, well, they're concerned about people's ability to still pray, for example. My understanding of the law is that the right to pray would still be intact. Once again, I think balancing these interests requires common sense, requires some empathy, some willing to compromise, and maybe some old-fashioned human decency, which I think too often gets lost in the shuffle.
But Dale, in your common sense example, there's a thing between private property, like the parking lot of an abortion clinic, and I would say if somebody comes on there, tries to assault, harm somebody trying to get out of their car in the private parking lot, that's totally wrong and they should be prosecuted. But if somebody's on a public sidewalk, how are you going to restrict their rights to be there?
Well, the problem, Terry, is that to get into the private property, you typically have to use a public street or a sidewalk
but
to
have there been any
get in there.
cases of that happening?
There have been many cases of harassment, absolutely, with people
Well, it's
going
easy for
nose
these
to nose
situations
with
to
women or
escalate.
staff people going into a clinic, screaming at them, shaming them, and all this says is stand back 15 feet. Surely that does not
15
invalidate
feet
the
back.
First
Any other
Amendment.
cities, Kathy, do you know of have these buffer zones in Ohio?
I think they run into constitutional problems on this one because free speech, the right to convene like this, and Terry raised a good point. Private property versus public property. I mean, it's just easy to see these situations escalating. I don't know how you'd enforce it. I think it's a tough one.
Yeah, the Supreme Court struck down a similar ban in Massachusetts. Theirs was 35 feet, and the decision there was that a public sidewalk is where you have a First Amendment right to speech. But that didn't. And while that caused many communities across the country to end their bans, several are still in play, and I believe New York states are still okay. Colorado has a floating ban, so it applies to where the person is.
There is a public problem here to address, and that is women's safety. There's been an escalating number of incidents at these places, at abortion clinics. Women are getting hurt, people are getting harassed. There's something they have to do about it, but I don't think it can involve violating free speech.
But I don't
We're
know
gonna
in
get to our
Columbus that there's been a problem.
Let's get to our last topic so we have time to give him due respect. Ohio lost one of its most accomplished leaders this week. George Voinovich served as mayor of Cleveland, 2 terms as governor and 2 terms in the U.S. Senate. Before he left the Senate in 2010, he gave his farewell address, quoting the Senate chaplain who admonished incoming senators.
Here was his admonition, quote, "May the immense responsibilities they assume and the vows they make when sworn into office
Minute and a half.
bring them to their knees with profound humility and unprecedented openness to you. Save them from the seduction of power, the addiction of popularity, and the aggrandizement of pride. Lord, keep their priorities straight. You and their families first, the good of the nation second, consensus around truth third, party loyalties fourth, and personal success last of all. May they never forget they have been elected to serve and not to be served."
Dale Butlin, you worked for the guy who he succeeded in the Senate. What do you remember of George Voinovich?
Yeah, well, not only did I work for the guy who succeeded him, I also worked for the guy who beat Senator Voinovich the first time he ran for that office in 1988. I was on loan from John Glenn to Howard Metzenbaum for that campaign. Look, I didn't know him as well as many of my Republican colleagues did, but there were several reasons that I always really admired him. Apart from his essential decency, the fact that he lived his family values, not just talked about them, his marriage to Janet, which went on for 54 years, was remarkable. The other thing that impressed me as a politician, he learned from his mistakes. When he lost that 88 Senate race, spent $7 million and got beaten in a landslide, a lot of people said he was through as a politician. 2 years later, he learned from his mistakes, retooled his campaign, got himself elected.
Terry,
governor
real
of the
quickly,
state.
your memories of George Voinovich?
Well, I was up there Thursday in Cleveland, and it's great to see, because people forget he loved being mayor of Cleveland. Those 10 years really helped him as governor. He didn't really love the Senate. It wasn't fun, but he was a great, honest guy who really told you what he thought.
He'd be hard to get elected now, wouldn't he, Kathy, in the Republican Party?
Yeah, he's a little too moderate, I think, but that's what made him such a good leader.
He raised taxes. You can't do that now, right, Jackie?
Yeah, pretty unpopular idea for a Republican.
But he also believed in working harder and smarter, which is good.
All right, let's get to our off-the-record comments. Terry Casey, you're up first.
Well, today happens to be the 44th wedding anniversary for my wife and I want to give a shout out both to her, but whether it's political or media, when we have spouses, they go through a lot of pain, sufferings, and unusual schedules, and our spouses deserve a shout out for what they put up with and their patience.
All right, there.
The Cleveland Cavaliers now have a chance to do what no pro basketball team has ever done, but to make Cleveland a world champion for the first time in 52 years. They've got to beat Golden State on their home court this Sunday night. No NBA team in history has ever come back to win a title after being down 3-1. But LeBron James is a historic figure, now on a historic mission. Don't count him out. Go LeBron, go Cavs. Let's win one for Believe Land.
Jackie.
Governor Kasich vetoed a controversial voting bill this week, and there's some dispute whether his staff interpreted the law correctly, but regardless, it's done.
And Kathy.
Well, we talked about this earlier, but this is what I've got on the city ordinance on the abortion clinics and the protesting. I just think it's an overstep. I think they've crossed the line, and if it passes, I think they're going to have real trouble.
All right. The Columbus Library reopens the downtown main library this week. I'll put my objectivity aside. The library is a tremendous institution, from its story times that I took my kids to rooms for study groups in grad school, to its online renewals for those books I forget to renew. It's great. Congratulations to them and continued success. That's Columbus on the Record. Join us next week for our panel and for our crew. I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.